Okay, we're all set up here. Okay, canvas is ready. Let's take you around and look at this. Okay, this is what we're painting today. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Okay. These are two bricks that I collected on Crosby Beach, which at the time I was doing the brick paintings and I saw them. They're beautiful bricks. It gave me some ideas to work with, but I'll talk to you about that as time goes by. On the canvas here, okay, what we got? We've got our asphaltum is out, okay, and I've got very high tech here, some turpentine tipped into a lid of jam jar. Okay, it's just tilted up so that it all collects at one end. Okay, that's what I use to dip. Okay. To start off with, I'm going to put a thin brown wash across this. Okay. Like a mid-tone to work with, and then I'm going to remove some of that. It's called a wipeout. Okay, so I'm going to get some turpentine and start to dissolve. So we're looking for a thin consistency. This is a transparent paint. Okay, paints are either opaque or transparent or semi-transparent. Okay, this is a transparent pigment. It means that the pigment particle is very small, okay, and you get to be able to see through the layer of the paint, okay, to the canvas underneath. It's great for glazing, and it's ideal for thin washes like this at the start of a painting. So I'm going to just check the consistency. You don't want to dilute your paint more than 50% with the medium that you're using, okay. So if you want a lighter tone, apply it sparingly. So I'm just starting to rub some paint in. Okay. It's a little thicker than I want. Okay. If it gets too thin, it'll start running and splitting. We don't want that. So we're looking for the right kind of consistency, and it's best to put it on sparingly at this point. So I'm just gonna rub in a small amount, and then I'm gonna brush it out through the rest of the painting. Now, this is quite bad painting technique, okay, but because I'm rubbing the paint in at this point, and the paint's very fluid and thin, okay, I'm not being too careful of my technique. There's a little imperfection in the canvas there. We'll paint that out another time. Okay. So just rubbing it in, making sure there's a good even coverage, making sure that we get down into all of the cracks. Okay. Now, the correct brush stroke that we're looking for, okay, when painting correctly, okay, we want a nice whippy action in the wrist, flicking the brush like this, okay, rather than laboriously like we're painting a wall. We don't want that, okay. But as I say, at this point, I'm just rubbing in, so we're not going to get too uptight about that. Yeah. So while I do this, those two bricks that we found on Crosby Beach when we went to Liverpool, they reminded me of Anthony Gormley's sculptures. Okay, we went there to look at the sculptures. Okay, on the beach. I forget what it's called, that installation. But the two bricks that we found reminded me of Anthony Gormley's sculpture Field. I don't know if you've seen that one. Okay, he got lots of different people to participate. Okay, to come in and make small clay figures, and they all had little eye holes punched into them out of clay, and then they were arranged on the floor of a gallery. Okay, there were hundreds and hundreds of them, and they filled rooms. And those bricks that we found with the holes in it reminded me of the heads of those little figures. So that's why I brought them back from Crosby as a part of this brick series, and I've laid them down so that they look a little vulnerable. Okay. Just getting right across to the edges here, and I'm not worried too much about how even it is at the moment. Okay, I'm just trying to spread that out a little. Okay, I don't mind a textured surface to work onto. So there's lots of terps in this mix, so the paint is drying quite quickly as I'm putting it on. I'm putting it on very, very thin. Okay, it won't be very, very dry, so I should still be able to manipulate it. You'll notice also that it's not running. Okay, if there was too much paint and too much turpentine, it's a little thin here. I'm just going to adjust that. Then you would see it starting to dribble and split across the surface of the canvas, and we don't want that. Okay, I'm going to use a rag to wipe back out. Okay, for this painting, I'm going to want to keep the bricks fairly solid looking, and I want the background to be quite insubstantial. So I'm going to remove some of the background, do a negative space drawing if you like, and keep the bricks a little bit warm and dark. Because I want to put light behind them and underneath, and I'm going to put the suggestion of a reflection underneath them, just like with Antony Gormley's sculptures on the beach. So that's my intention with this at this point. Okay, I'm gonna start by painting in the bricks rather than wiping away. Okay. And I'm going to use still a bristle brush. This is an artificial brush, okay, not natural bristle, okay, synthetic is the word I'm looking for, okay, and I'm going to start to mark up the shapes of the bricks, thinking about it tonally as I'm going, okay, so thinking about light and shade, and still working with a really thin layer of this asphaltum, okay, so this will help me to locate the bricks within the image. I'm going to paint them approximately actual size, so they have a sense of presence of a real brick. Okay, but I need to think about the positioning of them on the canvas as well. I'm going to move them over to one side so that we exploit a sense of space and emptiness on this other side. Okay, so most of the bricks will be here theoretically, and I'm going to have to move them up just a little bit from the bottom. Okay, so that there's room for a reflection underneath. So I'm going to start around about here for the lead corner of the first brick. I'm just going to start marking in where that would go. It's a strange thing to be talking about the painting that I'm making as I'm doing it. I never do that. Really, really odd. Yeah. I'm not being too fussy at this point. I have to think about proportion, and I have to think about composition, but I'm not being too fussy about any detail. Because the paint is wet, I can continue to manipulate it as I work. So I'm just dragging paint off the top line that I've drawn there to soften that. I'm trying to dissolve the edges a little as I go. I don't want thick, hard edges on everything. With oil painting, we want to keep the edges fairly fluid so that we can fix them more firmly later in the painting. So you want to keep your edges fairly soft to begin with. Okay. And then when you're comfortable with the composition, you can start to firm up and lose some of the edges. Okay. I can see already that I've not done this big enough. Okay, so I'm just going to adjust that. So I'm going to use the rag to remove. Okay, just as I'm using paint to add and darken. When we did the charcoal drawing, where we worked with charcoal and the rubber, we were adding and subtracting tone. I'm doing the same thing here with paint. Okay. So you can see I'm laying in paint there, knowing that at some point I'm going to get rid of it. Okay. It just allows me to work fluidly and not be too precious about the marks that I'm making early. Okay. I'm going to start introducing the second brick, which is in part drawn by the shadow here. So I'll pop the shadow in on the first brick. And that'll help me to check the proportion of what I'm doing. Okay, so there's a shadow on the edge here. Okay. It doesn't come down quite as far as the other brick, so I'm just watching that, fading it out as I go a little. Okay, and there's a little bit of reflected light on the bottom edge of this other brick, so I'm just gonna take that back to the mid-tone of the canvas as it comes through. Curves out somewhat here. You can see I'm keeping the tone here quite soft. I do want this edge to fade back a little into the background, just like it will here. Whereas in the foreground, the edges are much stronger. And that contrast in the foreground through the shadow and the light that'll be hitting the object will just bring this edge forward for us and give us a sense of space between the objects. I've got too much paint on there, so I'll take some off. Don't worry if you go in too strong, you can always just brush it out like this. Okay. Now you'll know from watching me in the studio that the layers will build over a period of time, so you don't have to get everything exact as you want it and perfect at this point. In fact, it's kind of preferable if there's some flex in the system. As you search and you look for things, you'll make adjustments throughout the drawing, and things that you think are right today, you'll probably think are wrong tomorrow. Now that I've drawn this, I can see that this isn't high enough, for instance. So I've got to fix that. This needs to be much steeper. As it comes around, it'll give me a fuller edge back here, and then the shadow will come up that much higher accordingly. Okay. That's given me an edge that's too hard in the background, so I've got to soften that now. Okay. I don't want that big black hard edge there, but I let it firm up a little as we come round to the front. I'm just going to lose that edge a little bit more into the background with that kind of soft diagonal repeated stroke. Okay. This brush stroke, okay, it tends to pull things together. Okay. If you have areas which are spreading a bit too much, or if they're getting a bit thick, if you work with that kind of whippy technique, it'll tend to bring things back together in a kind of satisfying way, if you like. Let's continue with the bricks. It's still a bit puny here, I can see. I'm going to keep adjusting that. Okay, we've got 2 holes through the front here. I'm going to work in quite tentatively until I know where I am. Well, I think I know where I am. I'm sure I'll end up changing it. Okay, so we've got a elongated hole like this. Okay, with dark shadow at one end, and then it's very light at this end. I'm just suggesting those for now. We'll bring them out in more detail later on. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Again, dark at this end. I've brought that down a little far. Okay, I've stretched that shape, so I've got to adjust that. Okay. And we'll take that through. Making a painting like this is a constant set of adjustments. Every mark that you make is going to change all of the other marks that you made. It's going to make you think differently about the decisions that you started with. Okay. So you have to be prepared to work with that throughout the painting, throughout its course, and to not really be satisfied with it until the end. Okay. If you're satisfied with it at the end, you're probably winning, but that probably won't last either. In a short period of time, you'll start to see everything you wish you'd done differently. Okay. Such is the nature of painting. Okay. At least if you care about it, that's what it's like. Okay. Just by grouping them on this side, we're opening up this area as a space, if you like. So there's a congestion in this area which allows space to happen here. Okay, that's something that I'll exploit tonally as I work through the painting a little bit further. But I want that tension between these figures looking huddled in a corner somewhat. Okay, which will stretch down now with the shadows. Next stage is I'm gonna invent some shadows underneath here. Okay, and then we'll work with this as a space later on. I'm going to try to suggest that as a big empty kind of space which stretches off, much like the beach in wherever it was in Liverpool. I can't remember. Old man brain. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look at these shadows underneath. I'm going to start working that out now. Okay. So up to this point, I've been painting what's there. There they are again. Okay. That's our bricks. Can you see them? Yeah. Hope so. Okay, I can't see that view. But from now on, I'm making it up, okay, during this section, okay, because there's no reflection out there, but I have to make one happen, okay. So, this space, it's gonna be working in reverse. I've got to draw this shape in reverse. Having done lots of printmaking, it helps, okay. You've spent lots of time thinking about flipping and reversing images, okay. So drawing upside down is kind of second nature. And the shadows that we've got, I'm just reversing them and turning them upside down. I'm doing it in a very perfunctory way at this point, because this is it's a reflection, it's not detailed. It'll carry some of the tonal information that I want to run through this section. Okay. But that's something I'll figure out through the course of the painting. I don't need to know all the answers to that straight away. Okay. So I'm blocking it in dark to begin with. Again, this will reverse, okay, which means this curve that's doing that will do this. You have to draw it like a mirror in your mind. Okay. So you see I'm dragging paint and then I'm flicking the brush back over it to flatten it and well, use a better technique really. Okay. I'm going to wipe out back into that now with that reflection. And think about these highlights which would be reflected. That would be doing that sort of thing. Yeah, and then we have highlight here, which I can bring down. I'm gonna bring that in because it looks a little wide. Okay, and the reflection will be more like the brick the closer that it is to the brick. So as it comes away, I'm gonna fade the reflection out. This is tricky. Here, let's have a look. I think that's kind of what I will be looking for initially. Okay. This edge, this looks too strong for what I want it to be. I'm just going to soften that. Okay. It's far too strong. I want the focus to be here, not down here. This is a bit of something to suggest water, maybe. Like the standing puddles that we had on the beach in Crosby. I'm going to think now about kind of light and dark. I quite like that this is dark above here. That happened randomly during the paint. So I might just lighten this side somewhat. It's very subtle. Okay. But then keep this area on this side a little bit darker. To again suggest that sense of claustrophobia, okay, on the one side and space on the other. It's a tension. Painting's all about contrasts. Warm and cold, thin and thick, smooth and textured. Space, the absence of space. Curved lines, straight lines. It's all there for you. Yeah. So having put them in, I'm thinking a little bit about how I want the painting to look towards the end, but that's going to change a lot, obviously, through the course of me doing it. I'll change my mind many times, but right now this seems like a good idea. Yeah. And that's pretty much all I can work with. I'm going to suggest a sort of line through here, okay, just because it'll suggest flatness behind. I'm going to end up softening that, but it'll indicate a kind of flatness to the landscape, proposed sort of mystical, non-existent landscape that these bricks are going to exist in. And as a first layer, that's it for now.